multiplying decimals. Let's take a look at the following example, 2/10 times 4. Let's think about what 2/10 times 4 means. Well, if I have a 10 by 10 grid here, so this is 1/10, and this is 2/10. Now, what I want is to make 4 groups of 2/10. So here's one group of 2/10. This would be another group of 2/10, a third group of 2/10, and a fourth group of 2/10. So 2/10 times 4/10 means that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tenths. So let's take a look at what that looks like when we use regular multiplication, or look at this symbolically. So we've got 2/10 times 4. When you multiply with decimals, write this down. When you multiply with decimals, you do not need to line up your decimal points, because my decimal point on 4 is right here. So notice I do not have those lined up. My decimal point is here, and my decimal point is right here. I don't need to show that on my whole number. So what you're going to do, 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 0 is 0. Now, how do you know where the decimal point goes in your answer? What you're going to do is count up the number of places that you have behind your decimal point in your problem. So here I have one number behind my decimal. See how I have my decimal point here? I have one number behind my decimal point. So, and then on this one, I have 0 numbers behind my decimal point. So in my answer, I want one number behind my decimal point. So I'm going to start with it here, and I'm going to move it one space. So my answer is 8/10. What about 2/10 times 3/10? Well, let's look at what that means. I have 2/10 here. So if I want to take part of my 2/10, because we know that part of means multiplying, I want to take 3/10 of that. What I'm going to do is draw my 3/10 this way. And where they overlap is my answer. So where do they overlap? Right here. And 2/10 times 3/10 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hundredths. And the way we write hundredths is like this. So let's look at what that looks like when we multiply that out. 2/10 times 3/10. We're going to forget about the decimal points right now. We don't have to line them up. They just happen to line up like this right now. We're going to forget that they're there. So 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 3 times 0 is 0. I could say 0 times 2 is 0, and 0 times 0 is 0. Though I don't have to multiply all those zeros. So first you're going to multiply like there's no decimal points there. Then you're going to count up how many numbers are behind my decimal point here. 1. How many are behind my decimal point here? 1. I have one number behind my decimal point, one number behind my decimal point. So in my answer, I want 2 numbers behind my decimal point. So I'm going to take my decimal and I'm going to move it 1, 2 spaces. So 2/10 times 3/10 is 6 hundredths, and we showed that in our model. So here is a summary. When multiplying decimals, you do not need to line up your decimal points. You're going to multiply as if the decimal points do not exist. So multiply and pretend they're not there. Then count the number of numbers behind your decimal point in the problem, and that tells you the number of numbers that you need behind your decimal point in your answer. So let's start with 4/10 times 6. All right, so let's work that out. Let's say 4/10 times 6. First, we're going to not line up our decimal points. You can, you're just going to be doing more work if you do. Don't line them up, so let's multiply. 6 times 4 is 24. 0 times 6 is 0, plus 2 is 2. How many numbers do I have behind my decimal point? Here, 1, and here, 0. So in my answer, I need one number behind behind my decimal point. So I'm going to move it over here. My answer is 2 4/10. So my answer is 2 4/10. Alright, now what about 2 7/10? Make sure you're writing this down. 2 7/10 times 300ths. Okay, let's come over here. Let's write 2 7/10 times 300ths. Notice I am not lining up my decimal points. I'm not lining up my decimal points. 2 700ths times 3/10. 7 times 3 is 21. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 2 is 8. Leave your placeholder 0. 0 times 7 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. So go ahead and add everything up. All right, now we're going to worry about our decimal points. How many are behind my decimal point here? I have 1 number behind my decimal point here. How many numbers do I have behind my decimal point here? 2 numbers. So in my answer, I need 3 numbers behind my decimal point. 1, 2, 3. So my final answer is 81 thousandths. All right? So go back to your rule and make sure you've got these written down. And practice a couple. Practice multiplying like the decimals don't exist, and then practice counting up the number of numbers you have behind your decimal point.